1 Samuel chapter 7 is where we are this morning. As you listen to me sip my water. We were not here last Sunday because a bunch of us were at camp. Almost 50 of us, and so a lot of people were out, and certainly we were not here. And so we were not in 1 Samuel, obviously, and but we will be back in it today, and there are some things that I will explain for you as we get into the chapter. This is a breakdown of the entire book. Those are chapters 1 to 7, Samuel, chapter 8 to 15, Saul, and then later on we will see David. But for today, 1 Samuel chapter 7 is about a recommitment. And we are going to see a recommitment of the people to God, and then we will see a recommitment from God toward the people. It's a great chapter, and there are lots of biblical principles in this chapter. Now, what in the world is a biblical principle, and is that the same as your school principle? Because is that what we're talking about? Well, no. Different kinds of principles. And this is, when I say a biblical principle, it means something in the Bible that God sets up. It's sets a precedence maybe, or he sets up this kind of like rule. And that's just true from that point on. And it's not necessarily a rule where we go, it's just something you have to do. But you'll see, I'll explain as we get to them. There are a couple of major ones in here that we will look at that I'll point out. And then there are several that I will point out, but we will not necessarily have on the screen. But anyhow, we'll talk about those as we go through. Now, the recommitment right here begins with a return to the Lord, verses 1 to 6. Now, that's the first main division. Okay, so if this is your first time in here, or you're not really sure like what's going on, I am going to give you a breakdown of the chapter. It's going to begin with this. This is the first main division. This chapter will have two main divisions. The second one, I will point that out again. I'll have it on the screen a little bit later, but it is called Relationship Renewed. But the first one is a return to the Lord. And what I will have under there is some subpoints that look a lot like that. Verses 2 and 3, we will see sorrow. That's the first of our subpoints, okay? So main division is return to the Lord. So let's look at that beginning at verse 1. Then the men of Kirjath Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord. If you're right now reading and going, who are these people? What's going on? I'll explain. But let's read the verse. And brought it to the house of Abinadab on the hill, and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord. What's happening? What's going on? Who are these people? Let me catch you up, especially because we were not here last Sunday. Okay? The previous chapter, the people get the ark back. It says there that they came and took the ark of the Lord. What in the world? Let's start with that. Kirjath Jearim, that was one of the cities, one of the territories there in Israel. Okay, so we're talking about Israelites here. And they took the ark of the Lord. What is the ark of the Lord? There is a movie that came out years ago for all the 80s babies. It was Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you've ever seen that movie, there is a depiction of this ark that we're talking about. And it actually is a pretty good depiction of what we think the ark looked like, the way it's described in the Bible. But the ark was a box. And you go, what's so special about a box? What's so special about a box is that God designed the box. Now, God did not build it, but he designed it. And he gave the instructions for building the box to Moses. And then what God did was he said, I want you to get these artists. And he actually picked out some artists and said, I want you to use these guys. They are going to build this box. Now, what was going inside of the box? What was going inside of the box were some special items that God would choose and decide on what went in there. There was a copy of the Ten Commandments that went in there. There was some manna. There was a jar of manna. That was a special food that God had used to feed his people. The rod or the staff of Aaron, who was the brother or family member of Moses, and God had done a miracle with that staff, and so he wanted that in there. So it was a rather large box, it seems. And then on top of that box, there was a golden lid that God had given instructions for. And what God said about that lid was it was going to have two angels on the top. And God said, in between those two angels, I am going to meet with you there. So that was going to be a special place. And it's not that God, lived there on top of that box and, they kind of had him trapped there. It was just a special place that God had designed in order to meet with his people. He wanted to be accessible to his people. Now that ark was special. They were to take care of it. No one else was supposed to have it. Well, they got into a fight or a battle with the Philistines. And that box ended up being stolen by the Philistines. The Israelites were beaten. The Philistines grabbed the box and they took off with it. Well, now they've gotten it back, verse 1. And they get the box back. It's a fascinating story. If you don't know what the story is, you got to go back a couple chapters and read it. God was cursing the Philistines for having that box. It's a wild story. But the Israelites have gotten it back now in verse 1. And the men of Kirjath-jearim, this city, they come and they get the ark of the Lord in order to take care of it. And they decide that they're going to take it to the house of Abinadab on the hill. Take it to Abinadab's house on the hill. Now, how they came to that decision or that conclusion, we do not know. All we know is that they decided to take it there. And they consecrated Eleazar, his son. So Abinadab had a son named Eleazar to keep the ark of the Lord. So they consecrated or chose him and said, you are now responsible for taking care of this box. Make sure that it's cared for, stays clean, it doesn't get stolen. You're responsible for it. And it stayed there, we find in verse 2, for many, many years, in fact, 20 years. Look at verse 2. So it was that the ark remained in Kirjath-jearim a long time. What's a long time? It was there 20 years. And all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. Thus the reason why this first subpoint is sorrow. Why? What do you mean sorrow? Well, they lamented. What does that mean? Lamented means they wept, they cried. They were filled with sorrow and they cried. For what? What's going on? Verse 2, all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So they were crying after the Lord or for the Lord. What's happening? Well, the box was a symbol of God's presence. And when it got stolen, in their minds, God got stolen along with it. But they also realized that they had treated that box improperly. They never should have taken it out to the battle like that. Their hearts were not right. And they were far from the Lord. They were using that thing as a good luck charm. And they took it out there, it got stolen. So now it's back. Well, now they want God back with it. God, where are you at? Where they realize, they come to the realization that they're not right with the Lord. They've gotten the box back, but they want God there. Okay, so that's why they're lamenting, crying. Verse 3 says, then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, if you return to the Lord with all your hearts. Now, there are several biblical principles all throughout these verses, and this is the first of many. And that is that whenever we go to the Lord, whether we're going for the first time or for the 100th time, we need to go with all of our heart. And that is oftentimes the problem, is that we go to God with some of our heart, half of our heart, most of our heart, 99.999999999999999% of my heart. But I don't give him all of my heart. And because I don't give him all of my heart, I keep some for myself. I keep control over my own heart for myself. That's the part that I end up getting in trouble with. And that can end up consuming me. So Samuel says, listen, you guys are sorry here that, for what you've done. He says in verse 3, if you return to the Lord with all your hearts. Did you know that you don't have to return to the Lord? That you can go off and do your own thing. Live apart from the Lord. But if you're going to come to the Lord, you need to give him all of your heart. Okay? So he says, if you return to the Lord with all your hearts, then. So what's going on here is he says, if this is genuine, if you are really sorry, if you're returning to the Lord, then you need to demonstrate it on the outside. See, what goes on the inside is between us and God, right? I can't see what's going on in your heart. Only God can see that. What I can see is outward actions, outward attitudes, what you do, what you say on the outside. That's what demonstrates what goes on the inside. It's like baptism. When you go and you get baptized in water, it's symbolic. The person will put you under the water. That's symbolic of your death, your old life gone. They bring you back up. That's your new life. You're showing everybody, who's watching that, yes, my old life is gone. So what happened on the inside? My old life is gone, but I've been raised brand new. Well, Samuel is speaking to them and saying, listen, if in fact you're really coming back to the Lord with all of your heart, then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths from among you. Foreign gods, Ashtoreths, those were goddesses. The Ashtoreths were goddesses. In a moment he will name, in verse 4, he'll name the Baals. That was one of their gods, Baal. The Ashtoreths, or the goddesses. So what had happened was the people had been worshiping idols. They had stopped worshiping God, and they were worshiping idols, putting their faith in things, in statues, in symbols, rather than in God. So what he's saying is, if in fact you really are sorry, you're filled with sorrow, and you're really returning to the Lord, then get rid of those. When he says put away the foreign gods, he